Good morning, participants of the event. I'm very sorry I cannot be here with you today, but I'm traveling as I'm doing much of the time lately, so I'm glad that the organizers, they offered me this opportunity to address you through the video link, and I will try to do my best. And I'm sure that you have a very good conference, especially because I read the results of the analysis which have been performed on the Balkans, and the findings from this analysis I think should be the starting point for the action which should happen in the future, let's say, years. Now back to the substance. After media started to prioritize in the Balkans as in any other areas of the world, there were the expectations at a very high level that from now on they will be not under the influence of the state. They will be publishing real, correct, objective information, which should be impartial and not in favor of any political elites. The expectations only partially fulfilled themselves. Namely, media still need the owners, and the owners have their own interests. And want it or not, in the Balkans, the states are still very important owners of media, if not states directly in the form of, let's say, having public TV services, radio services, and so on, but also through their system of financing media, through so-called say state-owned enterprises, which are spending a lot of money on commercial advertisements in the media, and of course media are dependent on them. So, and since media, they simply don't want to go against the companies which are being their greatest advertisers, that means that it is very easy to assert the influence over the work of the media. But still, media started to do their job, and media were and still are discovering cases which otherwise should never come to the attention of the public. Cases of corruption, cases of economic crime, cases of some other forms of criminality, and media started to raise the expectations of the general public in all of our countries that something will happen, that the police will go after the bad guys, that prosecutors will investigate and prosecute afterwards, and that the courts will send the criminals behind the bars. But this didn't happen in many cases, and the reasons for that are quite different. First of all, people, at least people in the organizations which should deal with things like corruption, organized crime, economic crime, they do not trust media to the full extent. So whenever they see something published in the media, they still have some reserve, saying, the first question which appears for them is, well, why is this printed now, here, in such a form? What are the real goals behind this information? They never, or very rarely, even consider the possibility that this is a result of objective, impartial and proper journalist work, with the purpose to inform the public. They always want to look behind of it. They would like to see some conspiracies, they would like to see some hidden agendas. And this is the reason why not all of the big media stories are picked up by the police or prosecution, which is basically even legally wrong. Namely, the criminal procedure codes in almost all of our countries in the Balkans are saying that when there's, the law calls it, voice of a possible criminal offense, the prosecution has to start to act. And this means that they have to instruct the police to investigate the cases and so on and so on. But this doesn't happen very often. I also saw in my own career, cases when the state prosecutors at the top were saying directly against the law that they are not obliged to follow the media publications, articles and so on. But it happens from time to time. The real problem is that when the police starts the investigation, with or without the instruction of the prosecution service, they always would like and would need more information from the journalist, which printed a story in a concrete case. And usually they reach out. And here we have this different set of problems, because journalists are mostly not willing to cooperate with the police investigators, because they either protecting their sources, they don't want to give up the documentation they have, or they want to follow up on their own stories. And then the police and journalists have a little bit of problem, because police sometimes would want to do something, they could not get the assistance from the journalists. But there are also other cases where journalists are very much interested that police will do something. They offer everything they have to the police, but the police is not interested. And this is again based on the mistrust which they feel against each other. And as a minimum, what it should be done here is that the police would have to understand what media is doing. The media would have, the journalists would have to understand what the police is doing, because then it would be quite easier to find a common language for both of them. But of course, this is building of trust, building of the idea that they're fighting for the same cause, basically. This will take years, and it will ask for a lot of engagements on both sides. The problem is that stories, let's say from 10 stories which are published in the media, not all of them are really credible, are very reliable, and are very objective. And since police investigators or prosecutors, they know that, they usually don't want to embark on something which is perceived from the beginning to be a very doubtful exercise. And again, we are back to the question of trust. More stories which will be credible, reliable, objective, impartial, more the police will start working on them. But the police, with the police, is only the question of the trust. As I said, with journalists we have another problem. See, when journalists are writing, or let's say preparing articles or TV shows on, let's say, very bad things, so terrible criminal offenses with a lot of damage caused, and they see that nothing happens afterwards, they have to answer themselves the very basic question: is it my article enough, or should I make a step forward? Should I turn into somebody who's actively engaging with the police? Should I be the one who will turn into a whistleblower? Should I be the one who will turn into a collaborator of the police? See, basically here I think this is not the task of the journalists. They do their job by publishing articles, by preparing, let's say, TV or radio shows. It is the task of the state side, or the police, or the prosecutors, to pick up the stories and start actively engaging with them. Of course, it would be nice if the journalists would be willing to assist and to help, but even without their assistance and help, the police would have to pick up the stories and start doing something. Percentage of cases which are being published in the media and then go to the court is really very small. But this does not relate only to the stories which are published by the media. If you would, say, take a look on the number of cases with which police is dealing with, and which they after finish at the court, you will see that also the percentage of those cases is not very high, which is basically even good, because if all the cases would come truth, and in all the cases we would be able to find criminal offenses and evidence for them, then we would have very say, bad situation in our countries. So it's still good that we have filters which are filtering what are the real cases which deserve attention of the police, of prosecution service, and at the end of the judiciary. But still, there are some cases which would have to be investigated, and they are not. And this problem will not correct by itself. It will ask for engagement of both sides, the state and the media side, because they have to find a common language. They have to know what they're doing. They have to try to find a way how to work together. And this trying to find a way how to work together is already reaching into another area, which is prevention. Now, we have corruption in media too. It's a very simple proof for that is that, let's say, in Slovenian National Anti-Corruption Strategy, which was adopted in 2004, you have a special chapter which foresees anti-corruption measures in the field of media, because the drafters of the strategy consider that this is so important area that there have to be very precise preventive measures in place too. And those measures deal with the issue of ownership of the media, of transparency of financing, of the relations, let's say, between the owners, the management and journalists, and so on, so on, so on. So there's, within media, many things could be done, but also in relation between media and other parts of society, a lot will have to be done too. But for that, again, this cannot happen without active participation of journalism. If we say that media are the fourth branch of power, and we mean it, then of course we cannot prepare any anti-corruption preventive measures for the media without participation of media themselves. And of course this asks for engagements of journalists, not only in the sense that they will objectively, impartially publish all the stories which they find, but also in the sense that they will, in advance, try to set the rules and to follow the rules which will, let's say, bring the possibilities of corruption in media themselves down to the minimum. Research from the previous times showed, let's say, that in my country, Slovenia, journalists are quite often exposed to very indecent proposals. Some of journalists accept those proposals without knowing that there's something wrong. And that means that, and this is the reflection of the situation of the whole of the country, because usually people under the term of corruption, they understand only giving or taking bribes in the form of money. They don't understand this when they speak about services, gifts, and so on and so on. This refers to the journalists too. And journalists are extremely exposed because they really are important in all of our countries, and people who have the power and people who have the money, they know that. And they know that they can influence the journalists even only if they are willing to pack this into some sort of package which will be acceptable for journalists. It would be good, it would be nice, it would be desirable if the special, let's say, policy for fighting corruption within media would be developed. But of course this policy cannot live by itself. This policy will have to be closely coordinated with all other public policies in, let's say, in all our countries, in all other areas of social life. But what is extremely important here is that journalists will have to take part in it. Because with such a thing, they will get the feeling of ownership, they will know what are the problems, they will know what are the possible solutions. And here, the public institutions are just to offer the help and the assistance. And they can offer it only to the extent which should be allowed to them by media. And this is the only way how we can try to influence the media. And if we do this, it will take years, but for sure at the end we will have, I will not say better media, because we already have reasonably good media in this region, but we will have media which will deserve a lot of trust, rightfully, from all parts of the population, including the police, investigators and prosecutors. And then things will be where they should be for years already.